Good morning and welcome to another episode of Iconic Freedom, the Formula. We are setting a standard for accountability, the ownership of your choices, and responsibility, the ability to respond to those choices. Let each care for self, and all will be cared for. I'm always kind of amazed and amused when I am trying to think of how do I want to title a particular episode. And it was funny because one of the people that I'm going to talk about today, I thought, was kind of a jerk. And then I heard Elon Musk talk about this guy saying that this guy was a jerk. And I thought, I think that's what I'm going to call the episode, the forensics of being a jerk. There's a couple of clips that I'm going to go through today that from stuff that happened this past week. Everything has been flying so fast that it almost seems like these things that just happened this week are old and they're out of the news cycle. They're not really completely, but it is kind of funny how fast everything seems to be moving these days. Hey, if you would hit that like button, share this with your family and friends. You never know if it's going to help them in their own endeavor of their own path and journey to accountability, responsibility. And, of course, if you're interested in subscribing, I'd be mighty grateful for that as well. That link is just down below. Okay, so we're just going to jump right into it. I'm going to play this clip from an interview that was done this week with Elon Musk and asking about his company, Tesla. And we talked about this a little bit last weekend about all the shenanigans going on with people keying their cars and setting stuff on fire. Really nice, though, is that these people are being arrested and they're being charged with felonies, which means there's a minimum mandatory sentence on that stuff. So we'll see where all that goes. Deterrence, it doesn't solve the problem, doesn't solve that person's issues, but it does create a deterrence for other stupidity that may want to go down that road. Anyway, so here we go.
A moment ago. Right. Do you think it helps sales if dealerships are being firebombed? Of course not. And Tesla customers are being intimidated all over the country and all over Europe. Mm-hmm. Does that help Tesla? I mean, you had Tim Walz, who's a huge jerk, running around on stage with the Tesla stock price where the stock price had gone in half, and he was overjoyed. What an evil thing to do. What a creep, what a jerk. Like, who derives joy from that? And it was pointed out to him that actually, Minnesota State Pension Fund is a major investor in Tesla. But he didn't care. He was so overjoyed by Tesla stock going in half. Does that sound like a good person to you? I don't think so.
I'm going to go ahead and play the clip where there's actually two of them, and then we're going to forensically go in and kind of dissect it. But that statement from Elon about the way the governor of Wisconsin was behaving, it's pretty contemptible behavior when you're wishing, bad things on other people. And, I find it very fascinating that we are in a culture now where that kind of stuff, you're crazy, whatever is going on in your head, is perfectly acceptable to be expressing it. There was a time in our world where, we didn't really do that. And if people were crazy, they locked them up, which was interesting. Anyways, here's the clip with Tim Walz.
I know some of you know this on the iPhone. They've got that little stock app. I added Tesla to it to give me a little boost during the day. 225 and dropping. So I have to be careful about being a smartass. I was making a joke. These people have no sense of humor. They are the most literal people. But my point was they're all mad, and I, said something I didn't, probably shouldn't have about a company.
Okay, so one of the things that you're going to notice about this, and people do this a lot, is that they want to say certain things and they don't want to be accountable for them and for the aftermath of whatever they say. But they want to try to walk it back by saying, oh, it was a joke, oh, I was just kidding. And the reality is that they're not, right? Because If you are a fan of this show and you've been listening to this podcast over the last couple of years, you know that whatever comes out of your mouth was intentional. Whether you think it was intentional doesn't matter. It's you being attached to the outcome of, I didn't mean to say that. Yeah, you did. Your body knew better than your mouth did, right? That old phrase, you're talking out your ass because your mouth knows better. Well, that applies to people like Tim Walz. And what's interesting is that in the first clip, he's making comments, some very derogatory comments about Tesla and their stock, and he's basically sitting there being gratified by the fact that, the stock is going down. And that because of all the violence and everything that's going on, that's a good thing. So he's sitting there and he is advocating for people to continue the behavior. Now he can say, oh, no, I'm not. Yeah, you are. Because that's how the price is being driven down. It's not being driven down because people don't want it or the price is too high. No, lots of people are buying. That's why Tesla is doing so well. But sitting there advocating for the destruction of other human beings, and as Elon mentioned, this is part of, the state pension fund. So if the stock goes down, those people that are on those pensions are going to start losing money. And they start losing viability and quality of life. And then what about the thousands and thousands of people that are employed by Tesla? What about all the people, that are making the car? What about all the people that have the various dealerships and all the people that work for them? This is why it is so important to understand that what comes out of your mouth is important. It matters. It isn't just some flippant, statement that you make. It can have an impact. And if you're a person that hasn't developed accountability or responsibility, if you don't have those qualities of integrity and character, then things will come out of your mouth and they will have far-reaching circumstances and outcomes to them. Some of which, people say, oh, they're unintended. I don't think they're unintended consequences. I think they're intended consequences. Because people were willing to be able to say certain things. Now, in Tim Walz's, in his particular situation, in the forensics of being a jerk, which he is being a jerk, that you would, denounce people and that you would want their failure and their destruction. That's some pretty sick behavior coming out of your mouth. But what he tried to do in that second portion of the clip, which was another day, he tried to sit there and say, oh, these people take everything so seriously. So now you're blaming people for what they heard because it didn't go the way you wanted. So now you're blaming them. You're sitting there saying, oh, it's your fault that you feel the way you feel. It's not about feeling. It's about listening to you and the reactions and the things that you have said and the outcomes and, basically the fallout that's going to happen from somebody like you opening your mouth and saying those things and driving somebody's stock down, driving people away from wanting to purchase a Tesla, whatever it is. Now, look, we're talking about Tesla, but it could be any company. It could be any product. If you want to boycott, feel free to do so. A couple of years ago, all that stuff with Bud Light and this guy, I can't even remember his name, Mulvaney or whatever it is, and the conservative side decided we're going to boycott. And so they started boycotting. And it drove that product, it drove prices down because people were making a decision that they didn't want to support it. Okay, so does that compare with what's going on right now? No. Why doesn't it? Because what's going on with Tesla is people are destroying property. It's fine if you want to stop buying the car, and then we start to see that from that, the stock is going down. It's a different thing when you're inciting violence. And I definitely want to point out the idea that, listen, you are free to make your choices. If you wish to incite violence, then you just know that there's going to be consequences for stuff like that. But the other factor about this that I don't hear it mentioned too often is the intimidation factor, is that by people, going around and keying these vehicles and, putting swastikas on them and then lighting things on fire and setting businesses on fire, this is a form of terrorism. This is what terrorists do. They want to demoralize, they want to incite violence, and they want to intimidate. And they want to get people to do something through violence. We're just not a society that's going to do that. We have to decide, are we a society that is going to accept that behavior, or are we a society that's going to reject that behavior? And the only way it gets rejected is that you got to call people out on it. You need to expose it. You need to amplify it so that people are aware. If you still want to make a choice to go in that direction, you know what? By all means, then that's what you're going to do. And then you will see what those outcomes are like. Nature has a way of being able to come around, that whole saying about what goes around comes around. It will seek its own balance. It will seek that harmony. It will seek homeostasis. And if you're a person that's making choices that are destructive to nature, then nature's going to slap back. And you know what? Nature's a lot more powerful than you and I are. So it's an interesting thing to watch this unfold, but to see more and more people pushing back and saying, this is not okay. This behavior is not okay. If you want to act like a jerk, you can act like a jerk. If you want to say things and be a jerk, go ahead and say things. But what we will not tolerate in a society without consequences is people inciting violence, intimidation, and destruction of property. If those things are permitted to go on, if domestic terrorism is permitted to go on, what kind of society do you have after a while? And, you'd start to see what that looks like. Anyway, so I don't want to forget to wrap up with that. So Walz, with his, the forensics of being a jerk, is then trying to be victim to it, trying to play the game, trying to sit there and say, oh, it was only a joke. People will do that a lot. They'll insult you and they go, oh, I'm just kidding. No, it's a passive-aggressive move, and that's what he was doing. And then he was trying to play victim to it by making some sort of comment that he was making a joke, when in fact he was being very intentional. What comes out of your mouth says everything about who you are internally. So if you're constantly insulting people, if you're constantly, making mean remarks and having to apologize or having to say it was a joke, you might want to take a look at that and see what's going on inside of you. What's unresolved inside of you? Clearly there's something unresolved inside of Tim and his mental instability. It's unresolved, and so he's expressing it externally, and he's letting everyone know, this is unresolved for me. So I'm going to seek destruction of other people, of situations, in order to satisfy that which is not satisfied within me. If you have those things satisfied within you, then you don't need to be reaching out or lashing out at other people. Okay, so the other piece that I wanted to talk about is this particular situation involving George Clooney. Now, I don't know if many people caught this, because it seemed like in the throes of all the news that was going on this week, this piece got lost just a little bit. But there's something kind of important about it, and so I'm going to play this clip, and then we're going to talk about the forensics of George Clooney being a jerk.
Happy you did it?
Yeah. I'll make it kind of easy. I was raised to tell the truth. I had seen the president up close for this fundraiser, and I was surprised. And so I feel as if there was a lot of profiles in cowardice in my party through all of that. And I was not proud of that. And I also believed I had to tell the truth.
I don't know if you all played that game, that card game when you were a kid, but I call bullshit. So I love how he starts off by saying, I'm going to make this easy. Like he's doing us a favor. Now, we talk about self-interest, right? All interest is self-interest. What would push a person to make a comment like that? I'm going to make this easy. Oh, because you're hoping that you sidestep your responsibility and accountability for your actions previously. I think it's interesting that Clooney wants to sit there and make comments about his party and that he saw what was going on. It's like, yeah, but George, you didn't come out the next day and say anything. You waited till it was trending, and then you had to say something. And was part of that because Barack Obama had reached out to you and said, hey, you need to say something so that we can get this dude out of office. This is a very interesting one that I think this story is fascinating because it's extremely manipulative. George Clooney is, he's Hollywood. He's been there a long time. He's got lots of people that love him and follow him. But be it as it may, he has his own popularity. He has his own following. He's playing a game. He's manipulating information. He's trying to manipulate people. He's trying to come out and make it seem as though he's the good person for saying, there's something about being honest. It's like, well, you're not. If you were honest, you would have said something immediately after that event. But that event went viral, and then a couple of weeks later, after there was the debate and everybody saw how cognitively gone Biden was, then we start hearing that Obama wanted him to write some article, basically supporting the idea of getting Biden out of the race. This is very subtle because, he's got all the surface going on. He, not to me, but to a lot of people, he's a good-looking guy. He speaks rather articulately. He's feigning that he's being honest and genuine and that he's always been taught to be honest. And, so now he's trying to draw on your emotions from childhood, that he's trying to say that his parents raised him to be honest. But he's a liar because if he had truly been honest, if he'd had those qualities, if he'd had those qualities to begin with, he wouldn't be a liberal. Let's start with that. But beyond that, if he was developing those qualities, it would have obligated him to say something immediately that, hey, I'm concerned about what I just observed last night at this event. But he didn't. He stayed quiet and probably was hoping, I'm just guessing, but he's probably hoping, like a lot of people were on that side, that, they would just be able to limp along to the election and that would be the end of it and Biden would get reelected. But reality had something else in store, and it decided that it was going to slap people that weren't paying attention with reality, right? Tap you on the shoulder, whisper in your ear, tap you on the shoulder, slap you across the face. Reality keeps doing that until you get it, until you pay attention. So he starts off with the whole thing of, I'm going to make this easy. Wow, do us no favors. And I was taught to be honest, which you were not. Then he starts to make comments about, trying to push it off on other people in the party, blaming people, not taking ownership of your own choices. It doesn't matter what anybody else is saying. It's a courageous thing, and yes, sometimes it can be a challenge for people that you have to stand up in the face of things that are destructive, that are incorrect, and that must be corrected. And the only way that happens is somebody with courage has to stand there and go, hey, this is not okay. But instead, they played the other game. They wanted to act like everything was okay until it was so obvious that it wasn't okay that they had to fess up to it. Well, that's not somebody being honest. That's somebody being manipulative. If you have people in your life that play this game that seemingly sound like, well, they meant really well, If you're starting to go down that road, well, they meant well, that's more BS. That's more manipulation. And that's something in you that is trying to virtue signal and want to ignore the reality. Listen, you don't have to judge it to say it's good, bad, right, or wrong. But reality needs to be your friend. And you embrace the reality by seeing what is, not what you hope will be or what you want it to be. This final clip that I have, again with Elon and this interview that happened this week with Bret Baier, is, I think, an extreme when it talks about virtue signaling. Because virtue signaling, you can be a jerk when you're virtue signaling because it's off the backs of other people that you're trying to look good, that you're trying to image build. When you look back at the Walz clip, when you look back at the George Clooney clip, both of them are trying to image build. They're trying to make themselves look better in a situation for which you're responsible for the adverse consequences and outcomes of things that you have said or things that you have done or things that you haven't said. Clooney is not understanding that, listen, you're responsible for what you say, you're responsible for what you don't say in the face of reality. You can choose to meet it head on, or you can choose to ignore it. But remember that, and we've discussed it, right, on this podcast, on this show, that reality will have its way, whether you like it or not. You can choose to ignore reality, but reality will not ignore you. Life isn't happening to you, it's happening because of you. And this last clip on, with Elon talking about virtue signaling, I think this is the ultimate in being a jerk. It's beyond being a jerk, actually. It's actually sinister in many ways that people would virtue signal through the act of war. And that's what he's going to talk about here.
For what? And I take great offense at those who put the appearance of goodness over the reality of it. Those who virtue signal and say, oh, we can't give in to Russia, but have no solution to stopping thousands of kids dying every day. They just want that to continue forever. I have contempt for such people. I don't want to make that clear.
Yeah. So you're optimistic.
Because they're virtue signaling, and their lack of a solution means that kids don't have a father. It means that parents lost a son. For what? Nothing.
This extreme of virtue signaling, again, is sinister. There's something diabolical about it, that people would sacrifice humanity, they would sacrifice other human beings for themselves to try to look good. When you look back at these clips of people today, you can see how that escalates. That you start with a joke and you continue on, and then you try to be victim to the fact that you don't want to be responsible for things. But if you're a person in power, in the case of somebody like Tim Walz, who might have been the vice president, or you're a person of influence, somebody like George Clooney, or you are senators and congresspeople that are in power, and you want to start wars, to what end? When will this end? How far will you go to make yourself look good? Now, you may not have people that are this extreme in your life, given, that understanding, of course. But you may have people that create disharmony in your life because this is who they are. They're willing to virtue signal, to sit there and say that they're a good person because of what they did. I'm a good person because I apologized for making a joke that insulted people and caused people to lose their jobs and incited people to violence. So you're the good person? I'm not quite sure I understand that. You're a good person because you admitted that you lied previously, and now you want everybody to forgive you because you've told a great story about growing up and being honest, and your parents raised you right, and so you want to kind of get into that with people, kind of stroke those strings of emotion with people and try to connect with them, all the while not owning the fact that I lied. That's all you had to say, George. You know what? I wasn't honest. I should have come out the very next day and spoke to the reality and said what I saw, but I didn't. It's a lot easier to have respect or regard, I like the word regard, for people that are willing to step up and say, I did something that I need to take responsibility for. I need to be accountable. I need to be responsible. I need to own the outcome of where that went or where it might go. And then here's what I'm going to do to fix it. Because there is no accountability if there is no action taken. We can sit there and listen to people all day long talk about, be responsible, be accountable. What does that mean? That means you own the choice and you own the outcome, and you have to be able to respond to the outcome. And you need to be able to fix whatever needs to be fixed, let go of whatever needs to let go, and self-evaluate and self-correct for yourself. So I say, ask yourself, do you think these people are doing that? Do you think they're self-evaluating, self-correcting? What is their self-interest of going before other people, before crowds of people, or before millions of people at a TV show, trying to act like you are the good person, that you are the virtue signaler? You're trying not to be a jerk, but the reality is you are a jerk. You lied. You lied to people. You took advantage of their good nature, and now you want forgiveness. But forgiveness doesn't happen unless there's accountability. And accountability doesn't happen unless there is direct action taken. There has to be an action taken towards a resolution. It is only then, in that moment, when resolution happens, that people can start to move away from whatever the given situation is. In the extreme, you hear what Elon is talking about regarding war. For the people that you saw today, the volume of their confession is not their defense. All they do is prove that the louder you are, the more guilty you likely are. And even Elon mentioned that in that interview, was that the people that screamed the loudest when he worked at PayPal were the fraudsters. So, something to keep in mind. Okay, and we are at the end of another podcast. Thank you so much for joining me this weekend. I hope you enjoyed this. Hey, don't go out and be a jerk. Go out and enjoy your life. Let each care for self, and all will be cared for. Hit that like button if you would. Share it with your family and friends. You never know how it might help them. Subscribe if you're interested, and we will see each other here next week.